In Lagos, the city that never sleeps, where the hum of traffic and the cacophony of human voices form the constant rhythm, there exists a silence no one dared to break. Hidden behind the industrial sprawl of warehouses and factories, shielded by layers of rusted gates and crumbling fences, stood the forgotten Kola Mental Institute. Decades ago, Kola Mental Institute was the pride of Lagos, a beacon of hope for those battling the shadows of their own minds. Its head psychologist, Dr. Oba Ayodele, was hailed as a visionary, a man committed to healing not just bodies but spirits. Patients traveled from across Nigeria, drawn by his reputation and the promise of innovative treatments. For a time, the institute thrived and its reputation grew. Then, one stormy night, it all fell apart. The details were sketchy, lost in folds of time and secrecy. 12 patients vanished without a trace. Dr. Oba, the man who had given the institute its soul, disappeared along with them. Rumors spread like a wildfire. Some spoke of human experimentations, others of occult rituals. The truth, buried under layers of bureaucracy and fear, remained elusive. The institute was shattered, its gates chained, its name erased from official records. For over 30 years, Kola Mental Institute stood as a relic of the past, a haunting reminder of what once was and what could never be again. The local government planned to demolish it, but every attempt was undone by mysterious accidents and sudden deaths. Over time, the institute became the staff of urban legend, its shadows looming over the city's consequences. When journalist Amina Adeyemi first heard about Kola Mental Institute, she thought it was another ghost story. But as she dug deeper, uncovering police reports, forgotten files, and whispered accounts from those who had worked there, she realized there was more to the story than anyone dared to admit. For Amina, uncovering the truth wasn't just a professional pursuit, it was personal. Her mother had battled severe depression of years, and Amina knew firsthand the stigma surrounding mental health. Exposing the secret of Kola Mental Institute, she believed could spark a long overdue conversation about mental illness and the human cost of ignoring it. But as she stood the institute's rusted gates, staring at the crumbling edifice that had once been a place of healing, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far darker than she had anticipated. The air around the building felt heavy, charged with an energy that seems to hum just beneath the surface. She took a deep breath, adjusted the strap of her camera bag, and pushed the gate open. The truth was waiting for her inside, and she would stop at nothing to uncover it. The lead had come to Amina almost by accident. She was researching an unrelated story about infrastructure's failures when she stumbled upon an old police file tucked away in a dusty archive at the Lagos Records office. The file was dated July 1986 and was marked with a red stamp, "Case closed, insufficient evidence." Flipping through the file, Amina's interest was piqued. The report detailed the unexplained disappearance of 12 patients from Kola Mental Institute, along with its head psychologist, Dr. Oba Ayodele. Witness testimonies were vague, riddled with the contradictions. Some staff claimed to have seen lights flickering in the building's east wing that night, while others swore they heard voices chanting in language they didn't understand. The office solution was that the patients had escaped during a power outage caused by a storm, and Dr. Oba had likely fled to avoid a scandal. But the details didn't add up. There was no evidence of a break-in or forced exit, and patients' medical records suggested they were not in condition to escape, let alone disappear entirely. The more Amina read, the more questions she had. Why hadn't this story been covered by the press at the time? Why had the government been so quick to close the case? And why did the building still stand untouched in a city as rapidly developing as Lagos? Her editor dismissed her curiosity as misplaced. "Nobody cares about the haunting asylum, Amina," he said, barely looking up from his computer. "Focus on stories that matter." But Amina couldn't let it go. Something about the file gnawed at her. A quiet voice in her mind urging her to dig deeper. She spent days searching through old newspapers, interviewing retired police officers, and patching together fragments of the Institute's history. Eventually, her research led her to Baba Kufi, a former security guard at the Institute who now ran a small kiosk in a little town. When she mentioned Kola Mental Institute, the old man's face paled. "Why do you want to know about that place?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a journalist," Amina said. "I want to tell the truth." Baba Kufi shook his head. "The truth? The truth is that some doors should never be opened. I worked there for 5 years. I saw things I still can't explain. If you are smart, you'll leave it alone." But Amina wasn't one to back down. She pressed him for details, and after much hesitation, he passed off. "They say the patients didn't just disappear," he said, his eyes darting around as if afraid someone might overhear. "They were taken by him." "By Dr. Oba?" "Yes," Baba Kufi whispered, "but he wasn't himself." That night, something changed. The lights went out, and when they came back on, he was gone. They were all gone. The old man refused to say more, but his words only fueled Amina's determinations. The truth was out there, hidden behind the Institute's crumbling walls, and she was going to find it, no matter the cost. Amina arrived at the old industrial district as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Lagos skyline in the shades of orange and red. The Kola Mental Institute stood at the far end of the district, a massive, crumbling structure that seemed out of the place amidst the modern warehouses and factories that surrounded it. The building loomed like a dark sentinel, its windows shattered and its walls covered in vines and graffiti. It was eerie, not just for its decrepit state, but for the palpable sense of unease that hung in the air. Even the factory workers in the area seemed to avoid looking in its direction. As Amina parked her car and stepped out, she noticed a group of children playing soccer in an empty lot nearby. When she asked them about building, their game suddenly stopped. "That place is cursed," one of the older boys said, his voice trembling. "People go in and don't come out. My uncle says the spirits there don't like visitors." The other children nodded solemnly before scattering, leaving Amina alone with her thoughts. She couldn't deny the knot of fear tightening in her stomach, but she also couldn't turn back. The gates of Institute were rusted but ajar, as thought inviting her in. Amina hesitated for a moment before pushing them open, the ground of metal echoing ominously. She stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The courtyard was overgrown with weeds, and the faint smell of decay lingered in the air. She could see remnants of the building's former glory, ornate carvings on the archways, faded murals on the walls. but they were overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of abandonment and neglect. As she approached the main entrance, Amina pulled out her flashlight and a small recorder. "This is Amina Adeyemi," she began, her voice steady despite the growing unease. "I'm standing outside Kola Mental Institute, a place shrouded in mystery and fear. Tonight, I'll uncover the truths hidden within these walls." Her voice echoed faintly as she stepped through the main doors and into the shadowy interior. The interior of the institute was even more haunting than its exterior. The air was heavy, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. Amina's flashlight revealed peeling paint, shattered glass, and furniture recovered in thick layers of dust. She started in the main lobby, where a large reception desk stood at the center. Behind it, faded letters on the wall read, "Kola Mental Institute, Hope and Healing for All." Hope and healing, Amina muttered to herself. What a joke. She moved cautiously, her flashlight beam dancing across the walls. She found old patient files scattered on the floor, their pages brittle and yellowed with age. Most were mundane, routine checkups, medicational logs, but one file catch her attention. The name on the folder was Samuel Duro, Case 12. The file contains notes about recurring nightmares, hallucinations, and something the doctor had referred to as subconscious displacement. Amina flipped the last page and found a curious note. Sessions scheduled with Dr. Oba. Objective: exploration of the shadow realm. Her brow furrowed. Shadow realm? What does that even mean? She tucked the file into her bag and continued exploring, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. As the night deepened, the building seemed to come alive. Faint whispers drifted through the air, too soft to make out, but persistent enough to send chills down Amina's spine. At one point, she thought she saw movement at the end of a hallway, a shadow darting out of sight. She called out, but there was no response. Her grip on the flashlight tightened as she pressed on. Eventually, she found herself in what appeared to be the east wing, where the whispers grew louder. She entered a room that seems untouched by time. The bed was neatly made, medical equipment was still in place, and a photograph of Dr. Oba and his staff hung on the wall. As she examined the room, a sudden chill swept through the air. The whispers stopped, replaced by a low, guttural voice that sent shivers down her spine. "Amina." She spun around, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but the room was empty. Amina's breathing quickened as she scanned the room, her mind racing. Was someone playing a prank on her, or had she just imagined the voice? Before she could decide, her flashlight flickered and went on, plunging her into darkness. She fumbled with it, her heart pounding, when she felt the temperature drop even further. "Amina." The voice came again, louder this time. Her flashlight sputtered back to life, and she saw him, a translucent figure standing in the corner of the room. He was thin, his eyes hollow, and his expression one of deep sorrow. "You shouldn't come here," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "Who are you?" Amina asked, her voice shaking. "I was Samuel Case 12. He took us. He made us part of him." "Who?" "Dr. Oba," the figure said, his voice trembling. "He opened the door and now we are trapped. You must leave before they claim you too." Before Amina could ask more, the figure dissolved into mist, leaving behind an eerie silence. Her mind raced. Samuel's warning echoed in her ears, but it only built up her resolve. She wasn't going to leave, not until she uncovered the truth. Amina's flashlight flickered as she descended into the basement of Kola Mental Institute. The air grew colder with each step, and the faint smell of mildew mixed with something metallic, blood perhaps. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but her curiosity was a stronger force, pulling her deeper into the shadows. The basement was vast, much larger than she had imagined. Old medical equipment lay scattered around, their metallic surfaces tarnished by time. Rusted grenades leaned against the walls, and broken light fixtures hung from ceiling. At the center of the room was a circular pattern etched into the floor, intricate and otherworldly. Surrounding the circle were 12 chairs, each labeled with the patient's names. Amina recognized some of the names from the files she had found earlier. Samuel Duro, Amina Yusuf, Leke Omolara. What was this place? She whispered to herself. Her answer came in the form of a letter-bound journal laying on a nearby table. The cover was cracked and worn, but the initial OA were still visible in faded gold letters. It was Dr. Oba's personal journal. Amina opened it carefully, the page brittle under her fingertips. The entries were chaotic, filled with scrawled notes and crude sketches. Dr. Oba had been experimenting with what he called the shadow realm, a dimension believed he was connected to the subconscious mind. He theorized that by accessing this realm, he could cure his patients' deepest fears and traumas. But as Amina read on, the notes took a darker turn. Oba wrote of strange happenings, voices calling his name, shadows moving on their own, and patients who claimed to see figures in darkness. One entry stood out. "They are here, watching, waiting. The patients are the key, but the door won't close. I must finish the ritual." Amina's stomach turned. The journal didn't just document experiments. It was a confession, but she could process the implications. The whispers returned, louder and more closer. They weren't coming from the walls, they were coming from the circle. The whispers grew into a low hum, vibrating through the air. Amina felt it in her chest, a rhythmic drum that seems to synchronize with her heartbeat. As she stepped closer to the circle, the temperature dropped. Her breath formed clouds in the air, and the flashlight flickered again, casting erratic beams of light across the room. Then shadows moved. They unified around the circle, forming humanoid shapes that flickered like static on a broken television. One by one, the figures took shape. Their translucent faces twisted with pain and anguish. Amina's breath caught as she realized who they were. The 12 missing patients stood before her, their eyes glowing faintly, their mouths opening and closing as if trying to speak. At their center was Dr. Oba, his form more solid than the others. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, but there was a spark of intelligence in his gaze, a glimmer of the man he once was. "You've come to finish what I start," he said, his voice a mix of regret and menace. Amina took a step back, clutching the journal to her chest. "I'm here to uncover the truth," she said, her voice trembling. "The truth?" Oba laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I tried to heal them. I tried to free them from their torment. But in doing so, I opened a door that cannot be closed. Now we are all prisoners." The shadows moved closer, the whispers turning into anguished cries. Amina could feel their desperation, their longing for release. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Oba's expression softened, his ghostly form flickering. "The ritual must be completed." its only way to sever the connection between this world and the shadow realm. Amina scanned the room, her mind racing. The journal contained the instructions for the ritual, but the language was cryptic, filled with symbols and phrases that made little sense. She quickly gathered the materials scattered around the basement: candles, salt, and rusted ceremonial knife. The shadow watched her every move, their form wavering like smoke. As she traced a circular pattern on the floor with salt, the whispering grew louder, almost deafening. Amina lit the candles, their flames flickering wildly in the cold air. "The circle must be complete," Oba said, his voice urgent. "But beware, the shadows will fight to stay. They will try to stop you." Amina nodded, her hands shaking as she followed the journal's instructions. She chanted the words written on the final page, her voice raising above the noise of whispers. The shadows screamed, their form distorting as the circle began to glow with an otherworldly light. Amina felt a force pulling at her, as if the shadows were trying to drag her into the circle. "Stay strong," Oba shouted. "You are almost there." With one final chant, the circle erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shadows dissolved, their cries fading into silence. Amina collapsed to the ground, the journal slipping from her grasp. When she looked up, the basement was empty. The circle was gone, and so were the shadows. Only Oba remained, his form faint and flickering. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with relief. "You freed us." And then he was gone. Amina emerged from the Kola Mental Institute as the first rays of dawn lit the Lagos skyline. She clutched the journal tightly, her mind reeling from what she had experienced. Back at her office, she wrote the story of lifetime. Her article, titled "The Shadows of Kola Mental Institute," became a national sensation, sparking conversation about mental health, unethical experiments, and the consequences of playing with forces beyond comprehension. Families of the missing patients finally had closure, though the story left many questions unanswered. The government declared the institute as a historical site, sealing it off permanently. But Amina couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. The journal contained more secrets than she had uncovered, and the echoes of the shadows still lingered in her mind. As she stared at her computer screen, her phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "They're not gone." Her heart sank as she opened the email. Its contents sending a chill down her spine. The shadows, it seemed, were not done with her yet. I'm Kaya, and I'm grateful for your support today. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Sweet farewells until we meet again.